All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started? I'll do my best to keep an eye on the waiting room for those that are still joining. My goal is to try to keep this to about 30 minutes or so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a kind of a quick introduction, and then we'll get in kind of the into the meat of today's conversation. So my name is Kyle. I'm the CEO here at Reviewr. Very fortunate to have this type of conversation. You know, we do about 1,000 to 2,000 of these types of programs per year. So if you guys aren't familiar with Reviewr, we're kind of the industry leading platform for scholarship and grant management. So today's kind of conversation revolves around corporate giving and funding programs. So we've been doing everything from awards to scholarships to grants to board nominations, you name it. So for those of you who are doing more than just scholarships and grants, a lot of these concepts are still going to apply very directly to you guys. Kind of with that said, you know, we've been working very closely with our clients for the last probably give or take 6 to 8 months to really kind of define like what does AI look like for them. If you guys are like me, we use AI in a lot of our daily walks of life and a lot of the different things that we're doing, and it's really starting to permeate into our daily operations with our business, right? In our scholarships and our grants. And a lot of us are kind of self-reflecting and looking at like how do we practically apply AI elements, not just to create operational efficiency for your programs, but how we elevate the experience for all of the participants as well. And so it kind of brings us to today's conversation. We've kind of surveyed and worked very closely with our current clients to kind of fine tune like what are the five like most critical elements here as we approach 2026 that will provide you guys the most maximum impact. But again, like I talked about earlier, is providing an engaging experience, ensure fairness, ensure a non-biased compliant review, and things like that. So I think, you know, this list could significantly be longer than five. Our commitment is to kind of be at the forefront of AI development for scholarships and grants over the next year. So with all that said, like I mentioned before, I want to keep this conversation relatively short, simple, and concise, focus on these kind of five core areas. With that said, for those of you guys who do have the chat pulled up, I'm going to keep it open on my screen for this entire conversation. So for any questions or comments or anything that you guys want to add to the conversation, please do toss it in there. I am curious, and I'll try my best to kind of look through the participant list with like an emoji or a reaction. How many of you guys have started to dabble into using AI with your scholarship and grant operations? You know, it could be things like creating summaries that we're going to get into. It could be, you know, analyzing data for reporting purposes. But how many of you guys are starting to already do this type of stuff? And I'll keep an eye on the chat as I kind of go through. There's a couple people. If anybody wants to offer feedback in the actual chat itself of what you're doing, would love to actually see it. But with that said, let's start with our first discussion point today, which is going to be the utilization and detection of AI by your applicants. So I think, you know, the one of the main things we'll look at here today is operational efficiency. That's obviously where AI is excelling. By no means are we trying to replace human elements. But the first thing we're going to look at is on the polar opposite end. It's the applicant experience itself. So to set the stage a little bit, one of the more growing concerns that many of our clients have had is having clear visibility on how much AI applicants are using to generate content for their submission forms. So for a scholarship program, it could be, you know, AI content creation for their essay prompts. For a grant program, it might be like, you know, budget creation, or it could be like proposal development. And to be very clear, I don't think that that's a bad thing. You know, these AI tools aren't going anywhere. Our applicants are using them on a daily basis, and we want them to put forth their best proposal or their best application, putting them into a position for success. With that said, though, there is a major difference between copying and pasting full-on prompts and full-on applications out of Chat GPT and pasting it into your form, opposed to, you know, using the AI tools with prompt engineering, giving it a framework, and using it to refine their details, you know, fix their grammar, and best convey their messaging. And so again, what a lot of our clients are looking to do is just to get a better understanding of like how much AI is being used from an applicant's perspective. Right now, purely for data collection purposes, helping them deploy policies and procedures of how they want to do this moving forward. What I will tell you is we certainly have some clients who have been very forefront saying, hey, if we identify that you've used any AI, you will be disqualified. Do I think that's an extreme example? Yes, absolutely. But one of the challenges with that is we're making a lot of assumptions, right? Without having dedicated tools in place to really accurately define if AI was used and how it was used. Because there's a dramatic difference between using Chat GPT to rewrite something or help with your grammar than it is to write it for you from start to finish. So we feel that, you know, some of our clients might be at some risk by alienating and disqualifying highly qualified candidates for the wrong reasons. So one of the things that we're working on here at Reviewr, I'm going to preview this for you now, is a tool that helps you guys identify the utilization of AI as well as plagiarized content. And it's an evolving space. I think probably 6 months ago, you started to see a large number of organizations who, specifically in scholarships, moving away from like text-based essays to video essays, which I do absolutely like quite a bit. I think they're highly engaging. It allows the personality of the applicant to come through. But they did that as a way to combat the utilization of AI. But now we live at a point where you can have AI generated content that's very, very hard to distinguish. So that kind of went out the window. Side conversation, one of the other challenges with video content is it's hard to redact, which we can also come back to here in just a little bit. So with all that said, here's kind of an example of what you could expect to have within Reviewr. And we're calling it Sidekick right now. But again, the goal is to help bring very clear and accurate visibility into how much AI is being used by your applicants. And the way I want you to think about this is through a concept called a credit score. So there's a lot of platforms out there who are doing different types of AI detection, all of which have strengths and weaknesses and excel in different areas. And so instead of trying to alienate on one concept, the idea is to try to take the best of all these different platforms have to offer, integrate with them, and then provide you guys the results in a very simple, bite-sizable manner that you can make real tangible decisions off of. So in this simple example, we have a menu or a listing of all of our applicants. And again, these could be grantees, they could be scholars. And off to the right, we've got two columns, and this is your data that shows you comprehensively from like a profile perspective, what percent of their profile was either plagiarized or written with AI. So how I envision this being utilized is it's a way for you guys to create thresholds or baselines. So using simple math, if you had 100 submissions, you could actually average that out and say, on average, a typical applicant uses AI for 42% or whatever that number comes out to be. And that number is quite arbitrary. If it comes in to be 70 or 80%, I guess that's typically higher than what we want to see, but that's just the way it is. Comes in at 20%, so be it. But at least you now have a clear barometer or a baseline of what's going on. And then from there, you can start to measure individuals against these averages. So if I, as Kyle, the applicant, apply with like an 80% usage score, that's way significantly higher than the average. Now you can start to make decisions on that. If you want to go to the extreme end and disqualify that candidate, you certainly can. If you want to have statements on your forms that say, hey, we have tools in place to identify the use of AI, don't use it, you can at least accurately back up those statements. And again, it also does that for plagiarized content, which would be more relevant in the grant making space, ripping off other proposals or projects that have been submitted elsewhere. So this is great, but then the next question comes into play is like, okay, for a particular applicant, why did it get scored the way that it did? Because you don't want to analyze their entire application form. Like we don't believe that they're using Chat GPT to help write their name or their email or their address, right? You care about certain form fields. So with this type of tool, you can actually open the submission up and it shows you on a question by question basis which questions, we analyzed and then the results of it. So in this particular example, if this essay prompt or this text box was flagged for AI use, you can then click into it. And again, like a credit score, we can show you what was flagged. And so not only does it show you the content that it pulled up, but also why it was flagged for AI use. Was it a percent that was, written by humans? Was it completely 100% through AI? Was it a grammar update and fine tuning or tweaking of the content, or whatever it might be? So now we have to, with extreme certainty, we can start to make these decisions. Very similar with plagiarized content. We can actually click into that and it's a bit easier. It'll actually show you which content was flagged for plagiarized material and then specifically the source material that it was pulled from. One question that I got the other day about this is if it was like a self-plagiarized, right? So if it was like their own content that they've reused beforehand, what do you do with that? And so the beauty of this is they'd be able to identify, was this their own work that they've just now repurposed or is this net new? So again, the beauty of integrating with these other platforms is that we're able to very clearly and accurately show you the results and then give you guys the data that you guys need for like a data-driven decision. So question, I guess you guys can use thumbs up or emojis. Is this a concern for many of you? Like, do you have concerns around the utilization of AI by applicants? And then for those of you who do have those concerns, if you want to answer in the chat, what are you going to do with that? Like, are you going to have like a firm policy or are you going to eliminate people or disqualify them? Or are you going to allow them to kind of proceed on just out of pure curiosity? The next thing that I want to look at here today is more of an operational tool. And we're going to kind of shift our focus now to operations for the rest of it. And this is going to be summaries, or what I like to call review briefs. And so again, to kind of set the stage or kind of go through like an example here. What do we do in the case if we have a bunch of review team members who are reviewing applications? Right now, we've got a lot of data that suggests that roughly 40 or so submissions is the baseline of how many they can review. Volunteer fatigue is a real thing. Anything greater than 40, we start to see a pretty large diminishing return in the quality of review. To the extent that even using a scorecard, the very first person that was scored and the 41st person that were scored are actually on a different scale. And there's other things that we can do to combat that. So then the question comes into play. How do we then, if we don't have the ability to expand our team or play with a ratio of applicant to evaluator, what can we do where they still score 40, 50, 60 people, but cut the time in half, right? And summaries are probably the most strong way that we can do that. Let's be very clear. A lot of these scholarship applications and things that we're looking at in grant applications have a lot of fluff, and you're collecting data in robust formats. And so for a review team member to read through these long, complex applications and file uploads, it takes a tremendous amount of time, even using the most user-friendly, efficient tools like Reviewr. So how do you then use prompts to target like what is the key elements within the data, both form and file upload, that will move the needle for the review team, right? It could be things like GPA, it could be volunteer hours, it could be budgets, it could be community impact. Again, these are all program specific. And just give the review team the very clear data that they need for selections. And to be clear, while I do know for certain we have some clients who are still going to have full on complex applications with file uploads, they're not going to have their team review them anymore. They're going to instead convert those to highly dense and comprehensive summaries, and they're going to use those to do the review instead. And again, for two reasons. One is it'll be more condensed, and two, it's going to call out the key details that we really don't want a human to miss. With that said, I think a lot of clients are also going to use this as like a preliminary review concept where, say you had 200 submissions and you got to narrow it down to the top 75. How do you get down to that smaller number? So by having the team do a review of the condensed version of the summary, you can do a quick thumbs up, thumbs down, where you can focus on who you want to allocate full time and attention to. So what does that look like? And again, I'll be very clear. When we get into summaries, a lot of the success of this will come from prompts, right? So like, what do you want the review team to be looking at? What are your key details that you do not want them to miss? But also be very clear that it's not just submission form content. It's also a combination of things like file uploads. And I think that's where you can start to see the power of this is when you go through a submission process, you've got all these form fields, you've got all these supporting documents, you've got all these references, you've got transcripts, you've got budgets, you got parent income. How do you then start to pull data out, right? And even if you didn't have a summary, just being able to pull the data out and then make it visually appealing to the review team goes a long way. So for example, here is what a simple submission form could look like. We've got a bunch of details from of a submitter. We have the applicant themselves. We have, professional achievements. We've got, impact. We've got leadership experience, mentorship. We got references, grades, transcripts, and then a whole slew of supporting documents. So again, even with the most efficient tool set, to be able to read through this entire submission form is going to take at a bare minimum 10 to 15 minutes. Plus now you have to review and score it. If you had 100 submissions, we're looking at 10 to 15 to 20 hours of time, that in itself. So we can flip the switch here and we can instead view a summary. And now we get a comprehensive overview of who the applicant is, all of their key achievements, all of their grades, all of their financial needs, all of their supporting documents. And if you want to take this to the extreme level, you can also do a fit assessment. Now, this is a more complex option, but if you have a very clear and concise scorecard or rubric or things that you're looking for within a candidate. Now, again, this is not meant to replace a human review. This would be very valuable on a pre-review to vet people. You can have the AI summaries start to compare against your rubrics and your scorecards, as well as analyze against other applicants to figure out, are they a strong fit for what you're looking for or not. So as a review team member, I took, a 30, 40, 50 question application form plus 15 file uploads, and I now have this in a short form content. So what we have here is an overall summary of the applicant, and then we have mini summaries by key areas that you're looking for: grades, volunteers, income, things of that nature. Right now, for you guys on the call, thumbs up. Are any of you guys using AI to summarize your application forms currently? Just out of curiosity, it's kind of one of the more low-hanging things that's publicly available to many of you. The next thing I want to look at, which I think is going to be one of the more powerful elements for every person on this phone or call today, is going to be both eligibility verification as well as document verification. So again, to set the stage, let's walk through a use case or a story. If I am in a grant program, let's go back to scholarships. If I'm in a scholarship program and I need to look at the applicant's GPA, I got to track their how many credits that they've been in. I need to track things like the schools that they're going to go to. I want to track parent income, all these things. We rely very heavily on that data being submitted to us by the applicants themselves. With that said, many of you guys are also then collecting supporting documents. So to verify your GPA, you have a transcript. To verify your credits, you got a transcript. To verify your parent income, you got things like FAFSA, you've got parent tax documentation. And for every single submission, you need to verify by comparing the form to the file uploads to make sure that they match. And if you went through 100 submissions and you caught one person that didn't match, I'm not saying that they lied. I'm saying that there's probably like a typo or they made a human error, then it was well worth the time. However, what if you caught 0 people? You still had to spend that time verifying the content in the form as well as within the file uploads. So to save you guys a whole heck of a lot of time, why don't we leverage AI and tools to do this for you? So that would look something like this. And there's a lot going on here in a good way. We basically said, hey, these are the form fields that we want to verify: GPA, credit hours, household income, graduation dates, tax filing status, whatever it might be. And each one of these form fields has a supporting file upload. So if I click on GPA, in the form, they said they got a 3.75, but we extracted that exact same value from a transcript. And if I click on the transcript, it'll actually show me what we extracted out of it. Similar concept goes for things that we couldn't verify. So for example, under credit hours, they said that they're completing 45 hours of coursework, but in their transcript, it only said 42. So we're able to catch that for you guys in real time automatically. I want to take this one step further. So not only will this save you guys literally upwards of 15 to 20 hours of manual review, because again, if it takes you 10 minutes per submission, because as you guys know, every file uploads in a different format, every transcript looks different. It'll take you a long amount of time just to even find the fields you're trying to compare. The second piece to that is how do we both ensure accuracy, but also lower the barrier for applicants? So in this particular example, we can analyze the file uploads, and then instead of saying, hey, applicant, tell us your GPA or tell us your household income, we can pre-fill it for them from the file uploads that we were going to use for verification purposes only. So very, very powerful things there. The next thing I want to look at, and I'm going to do another question for you guys. How many of you on the call now are doing data redaction to hide any type of personal identifying information from your review team or from your committee? It could be things like name, demographics, whatever it could be. Right now in Reviewr, and I want to be very clear that for any program where when the review team comes in to conduct a review and they may make an assumption about an applicant or there's data that may negatively impact their perception of them, we do want to redact it. In Reviewr, things like their name and their email and their demographics, things that we know can be hidden from your committee's point of views in real time. Where this becomes more challenging, however, is when that data lives in long form content. So for example, if it's in a reference letter or in an essay prompt or in a transcript, how do you redact that? And I know right now that's a very tedious thing because you have to manually read through the entire form, read through the essays, figure out what's considered PII, and then how do you physically redact it? You know, in a tool like Reviewr, you could edit it because we give you that option to lower the barrier. If you're going, through paper and uploads, you have to, physically download it, make a change to it, upload it back in. So again, going back to AI, we can analyze the submission form and we can identify what's considered PII. So for example, like Maria Rodriguez, that's her name. Lincoln High is the school that she goes to. Now that we know what's considered PII, we can use the same tools that we did for the verification to analyze the file uploads, see if we see anything that matches. So like, do we see their name in an essay or do we see their social security number in a transcript? And if so, we can automatically redact it for you. So instead of saying, hi, my name is Maria Rodriguez, I attend Lincoln High, I would say, hi, my name is redacted and I go to redacted school. So again, helps protect the privacy of the applicants, helps ensure a fair, non-biased review process. And then from a time perspective, we're using tools to do this for us. We're not having to manually read through all this content to make those decisions. So I think the last thing I want to look at here, and this is going to be in its own webinar probably at the end of the month or sometime next, which is using AI and also just smart intelligence and tools to increase operational efficiency for your review team, as well as reduce, fairness and bias in the review process. I do want to focus on AI today. With that said, a lot of these concepts though have a framework in place to get to it. So again, if you go back to what I mentioned earlier on, and I'm going to jump right into an example here. When I mentioned that on average, most volunteers really struggle to look at more than 40 submissions, we have that data available for you guys. What do you do? Yes, you could certainly increase the team size, which is more challenging to do, or you can leverage some of the tools that we have that could do auto distribution. So you could say, well, you know what? We don't need the review team to look at every submission. We just need them to look at 10 of them a piece. And then using tools to automatically and randomly do that distribution for you. So there's a lot of things like that that we have currently in Reviewr. I want to show this to you, but then I also want to introduce the AI concept here. So the reason why I kind of went through that long-winded explanation is there's a lot of ways that you and your teams can pair up a submitted application with a team member for review. We at Reviewr give you a wide variety of tools to do that as efficiently as possible. We also want to layer on metrics to help you make the most informed decisions. So in Reviewr, I'm not going to get too deep into this. We have a concept called groupings, and this is basically how you pair up a group of submissions with a team for review. Now, within that grouping, we also want you to be aware of what's going on, right? So like your judge or committee member to applicant ratio, is it higher than that 40-to-1 ratio or whatever it might be? If so, it'll flag it for you so you can start to make decisions off of it. What I want to look at here, though, is what we call assignment models. So in Reviewr, you could actually individually pair up individual submissions with your review team. So I could say, okay, my applicant Sarah should be reviewed by Dr. Sarah, Michelle, and James. Or I could say, I want Sarah to review James and Jessica. That's very manual. There's a lot of reasons why clients may decide to go this route. Alternatively, we have some clients that will say, hey, I want every submission to be reviewed by every one of our committee members. Great, that's just a toggle. So what I want to get to here is this random balance. And this is the most common configuration we have at Reviewr. And it's a way for you guys to do auto and equal distribution. So you could say, well, you know what? I want every one of my, let's just make this number huge. Right now, we have it set where every one of my submissions is scored 10 times a piece. Well, if we look at that, that means each submission or each judge is looking at 130 submissions. That's way too many. So you can kind of play with these numbers and say, okay, well, if I want them to score no more than 40, what does that look like? So in this case, that means that every submission will be scored 3 times, equally and randomly. And then again, the system will do this for you. Now, to inject AI, the reason why we have to have this conversation is I just introduced tremendous risk. And that risk is that not every submission is now being scored by the same people. So what if I, as Kyle, on average, am a really tough scorer and I give out a score of, let's just say 15 on average. However, Rachel gives out a score of a 30. If you were assigned to me and not Rachel, you are going to be negatively impacted because she scores 2x what I score. That's not fair to them. So how do you use tools like AI to A, identify individual judging tendencies, and then B, take it into consideration and normalize it for you? So at Reviewr, let's take a quick look at that here. Let's get out of this. If we look at the results, you basically have a leaderboard here. And so in a very traditional scoring model, most organizations look at scorecards and they have total scores and they have average scores. But again, if you are assigned to me as a tough judge, I'm going to tank the average and therefore it's not going to be fair. So if I click into this, it'll actually show you for each individual applicant who scored them and how they scored individually. So I can see right here that Professor Lisa Brown on average scores a 76, but she scored this particular candidate, Daniel, a 70. That is 13% below his or her own personal average. You can also see that Maria scored a 75, which is her average, and Thomas scored a 72, which is also his average. So you can kind of see my example here that even though Maria scored 3 points higher than Thomas, they actually gave the exact same score, right? They both scored against their own personal average, whereas Lisa actually only scored 2 points lower than Thomas, but she actually scored a full 13% lower than her own personal average. So using AI in our own algorithm, we have a new tool here called Review IQ, which basically normalizes it for you. So now it takes these new individual averages against one another. So in this case, even though they scored an average score of a 72, their actual score was a 13% below average. Whereas down here, Jessica scored 13% above average. So I would challenge you guys, if you have any type of process right now where the entire team does not review every single submission, to leverage a tool like this, I can share the formulas to at least get a good understanding of the individual judging tendencies by your team. And if you have any of those judges who are actually skewing averages, and if so, maybe take a stab at using the normalization to counteract it and take it into consideration. So threw a lot of stuff at you guys here today. I know there are a couple of chats. I'm going to go back and read those now. I apologize. It's easier for me to wait till the end. But if anybody has any questions or comments for me, you want to toss them in the chat, I'll hang out for as long as you guys want to answer any of these questions. It can be about Reviewr. It can be about AI. It can be about like unique elements of your programs. It can be about like your experience or how you feel about this. Just to kind of quickly summarize though, again, this is not an ending journey. Like we're going to be launching a whole lot of additional tools on top of this. Right now, there's kind of 4 key things that we're focused on. Number 1 is helping you guys detect the utilization of AI by an applicant. Number 2, using comprehensive summaries and briefs to help your review team spend less time evaluating, but also allow them to focus their time and energy on the most critical elements within a form. Number 3 is document verification. So comparing file uploads to the form to confirm accuracy. Number 4 is doing automatic redaction of PII. And then number 5 is trying to enhance the judging scoring process that takes into consideration the unique and personal tendencies of our judges, who we obviously recruited because we value their input. While I wait for questions to come in, I also do want to kind of quickly address some of the ethics as well as the data security side of things. So by no means do I believe that AI is here to replace a human. With all of these programs, your team should be asking questions that relate to what you're looking for in a candidate, and your entire judging, review, selection process should align with the mission and vision of your organization. And you cannot convey that to AI. It has to be done from a human perspective. The goal here, though, is to supplement humans with time and efficiency, as well as additional data sets to make sure that they are being equipped to select the most qualified candidates. From a data security perspective, I also just would challenge you guys, if you are using AI now, to be very careful with what's available. I've seen firsthand organizations take literally scholarship applications that include student information, that includes parent tax documentation, includes social security numbers, and they put it into Chat GPT. And while that's an incredibly powerful, great tool, we're now giving OpenAI or Google or X or any of these platforms out there our personal data. In fact, it's not even our data, it's our applicant data, to be used to train their language models. And that's a big challenge. So at least on a reviewer's end, all of this data is hosted and stored by ourselves. It's not commingled with other data providers or other clients. It's unique to you guys. So it's being used to help be efficient, but it's not being used to train learning language models across other clients. So I just wanted to throw that out there and just be very careful in our daily lives in general. Like it could be personal lives as well, of what we feed into these AI tools. So I'm going to go back and look through some of these comments. So one person mentioned that they're working through some guidelines. Yeah. Again, I think right now in the very short term, and that comment was related to AI detection. It's all about having the data that we need to set policy and then being able to accurately back our policies up. I don't personally believe in, fully disqualifying candidates, but I do believe that like there's extreme examples. So like if it's 100%, absolutely. If it's, somewhere between like 30 to 40%, I think it's probably good to go. Question around false positives. Yeah, that's exactly. So the question came in around false positives. I think that's in regards to AI detection. It's very valid. I think that's why you can't rely on a single source of truth. That's why we're taking like the credit score approach of looking at multiple platforms that are out there who are all doing things in different ways, and having kind of a cross consensus across all of them goes a long way. But then also for you guys to go beyond just a score, right? Being able to actually analyze why somebody was flagged and then be able to make your own human instincts and judgments off of it. Yeah, and somebody made a comment, and we actually had this came up, I think, in a webinar 2 days ago that, it's kind of a hypocritic mindset to say, "Hey, we're going to use AI, but we're going to penalize you as an applicant for using AI," and that's very valid. What I would argue on that, though, is again, like there's how the AI is being used, right? Like you're right, you don't want to punish somebody who is using AI to help build the best possible version of themselves for success, but there's a difference, right, between them literally copying and pasting prompts into Chat GPT, taking it as their content and putting it back in. I would argue, though, that the idea behind AI for the review team, because you're right, volunteer fatigue is real. I would argue that the biggest benefit of summaries, though, is not just time on task, which it certainly is. It's helping your review team cut through the fluff and very quickly and easily identify really important elements that move the needle. I'd hate to see a review team member miss something small or miss something in a large complex data set that sway the decision of that applicants.